You don't need to be a mechanical engineer or a soldier or even have a much higher IQ than the average monkey to realize that with our known current year technology, mechs, and really any sort of giant mechanical biped, are basically just overly complicated tanks. Logistically, technologically, combatively, economically, even mathematically, if there's a role that needs to be filled on a modern or postmodern battlefield, some other system or combi arms force can and does already perform equally well, if not better, and for a fraction of the cost of a hypothetical anthropomorphic war machine. Now, with all that being said, I think we can all agree that mechs are just way cooler to watch and probably would feel way cooler to drive around in. Why is that, do you suppose? Well, let's go on a little trip and I'll explain to you the lay of the land, as it were, as I see it. But do bear in mind as we go on that I'm exclusively referring to mechs in this video, not power armor or exoskeletons, not walkers, which are literally just tanks with legs, or mech suits. I'm talking about bipedal, building-sized war machines seen in the likes of 40K, Titanfall, Battletech, at least the more extreme end of the scale, Pacific Rim and Gundam. As for the big why of it all, it's all actually very intuitive and obvious if you really stop and think about it. It's all the same reasons as why almost every sci-fi setting insists that swords and axes are still going to be viable on the same battlefield as railguns, guided missiles, tanks, and drones. It's because, evolutionarily speaking, we haven't really moved beyond hitting each other with big sticks, as guns have only existed for around 5 centuries and only really became the main instruments of war in the last 2. So it's only natural that we'd project our old, tried-and-tested caveman logic onto the far future. There's a lot of the human operating system, particularly the males, built around the art of face-to-face manly tests of bravado, daring, and skill. This is why mechs are almost always bipedal, unless they're part of either an inhuman bad guy or an actual alien faction, even though it would make infinitely more sense, if they were built at all, to make them look more like this. And why give them hands? Why to swing a sword? And why give them a sword? Because the giant metal man needs a big metal stick, that's why. Nick Gillard, the stunt coordinator for the Star Wars prequels, described a sword fight as a 600-mile-an-hour game of chess where every single move is a check. And while he's not technically right, the spirit of that statement still rings wholly true, even as far as the slightly less humanoid ones go. It's the same as watching a giant gorilla duke it out with a T-Rex, but with the additional eye candy of giant lasers and explosions. And when it comes to mopping up infantry and tanks and even aircraft, who doesn't imagine themselves as the one man standing heroically against 10,000 ravenous foes who are ultimately no match for his sheer tenacity and power? To be absolutely clear, I ascribe exactly no amount of shame to any of this. I'm equally guilty of it as any of you. I like watching iron giants cleave each other in twain with swords the size of trees, or making waves of enemies die in the shade of their missiles like the modern Japanese version of 300. But I also think it's worth understanding just where these imaginary worms come from, that we know it's almost entirely a product of our rogue ape brains still trying to earn their keep even long after the ships sailed out to the west and been scuttled. That way, we can more adeptly discern reality from fiction. But anyway, this turned out to be a much more open and shut analysis than the sort I usually trot out on this channel. But hey, that's sort of the fun of it, at least for me. Even I don't know where I'm going half the time, and apparently over 800 people, going on 900 now as of recording, are on board with that. So if that applies to you and you haven't already, maybe you'd consider joining my little arcane wolf pack. Arcane just means obscure or strange, by the way. But in any event, until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay rational. Over and out.